am so happy that you are joining me today. My name is Alicia Grogan. I am the author of Your Kids Table, and I am coming to you today all for a special lesson on extreme picky eaters and even some milder picky eaters that can get really stuck in a rut with the types of foods that they eat. You know what I'm talking about. Um, you may have a kid that will only eat Dino chicken nuggets or will only have their macaroni and cheese prepared to just the right consistency, temperature, and shape, and will refuse every other kind of macaroni and cheese or noodle known to man. It can be infuriating and confusing. So today we're going to talk about just what that is, why it happens, how we can break it down, and I'm going to give you an example just to show you exactly how I would break it down as an OT and a feeding therapist. So I am so happy that you guys are here with me today. I see some of you are already logging on. Go ahead and give me a shout out and let me know that you are here. Say hello. Let me know where you're from. I'm actually in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and it is freezing here still. As you can see, I have a turtleneck on in the beginning of April. So let me know where you're at in the world. And hello, Jen. Jen just said, yes, help me. I have two and they don't even agree, which is even more frustrating. So you have kids that have two different things that they're being super specific about. And hello, Amanda from Idaho. What is your weather like there? Are you guys cold still? We are usually warm by now. And not so much this year. Hi, Els from Denmark and Lindsay from Chicago. Love seeing you guys here. Thanks so much for joining on. I hope that you all are enjoying the reminders. So if you don't know already, I have this really cool thing that I can do. I'd send you a reminder before I go live. At the first week of every month, I'm going to be hopping in here to do a special lesson, teach you something new, some kind of like feeding therapy or sensory stuff, all my things that I love to talk about as an OT and a mom. And I can send you a reminder in Messenger because I usually let all the folks in my newsletter know the day before. My newsletter comes out on Wednesday mornings. But if you're anything like me, the day gets away from you and you can probably forget. But I can send you a reminder right in Facebook. So right above this video, I have a link. If you want to get that reminder, I'll send it to you a couple minutes before we get on and just say, hey, we're getting on so that you can join us and you can ask me any questions live if you have them. Hello, Elle from South Africa. This is amazing. I love seeing you guys from all over the world, and I bet you're not wearing a turtleneck, Elle. Sadly, I hope the weather changes here soon. Okay, let's get started. I am so excited to have you guys joining me. And Amanda says she got here because of the reminder. That's awesome. That's great. Yeah, otherwise we'd mostly forget, right? There's just too much stuff going on. So let's get right into it. So last week, I published a new post, something I should have written about a long time ago because lots of parents of picky eaters are facing this challenge. So if you tuned in at the beginning, you heard me talking about food jags. That's what this is called. Is that kind of a strange word? It's a term that feeding therapists use. So it's not as mainstream. You may not have heard it before unless your child has been in therapy, or if you're a mealtime work student. My picky eating students know this word because I teach about it in class. But basically, that food jag mostly is happening for kids are in the more extreme picky eating. So we know that some kids go through kind of an average phase of picky eating, anywhere from 1 to 5 years old, and it can last that whole span. But it can often snowball into something bigger, or sometimes there's underlying causes like sensory, sometimes the way a child is having difficulty moving the food around their mouth that could make picky eating way beyond the bounds of the normal picky eating stuff that we see. When we see children being really super specific about what they eat, they're not just trying to be a pain in the butt. They actually have a really good reason for doing this. See, our kids that are extreme picky eaters, or again, sometimes some of our average picky eaters can have a food jag also. When they're being really specific about the way that they want a food, it's because they know it's safe. They know what it's going to taste like. They know what it's going to feel like inside of their mouth. They know how they're going to have to chew it. When that food is different, all bets are off of them. That's how sensitive they are to new and different foods. So they're trying and succeeding in controlling that food so much so that it makes us jump through these hoops because we know that they mean it. And we know that if we do not give them the chicken nugget from the right brand cooked the way they prefer, they're just not going to eat it. They're not going to eat it. And a lot of our extreme picky eaters are totally fine with that. And sometimes, again, if we're looking at those more average picky eaters, they could be doing this with a fruit or a vegetable. Well, we really want to get those fruit or vegetables in them. So if they want their apple cut a certain way with the skin off, we're going to do it, even if they won't have it any other way. So they are doing this. It's really important to get as a way to control so that they don't have an unexpected or negative experience, which they have likely had in the past. So most picky eaters have had some sort of unpleasant experience, and is why they start to narrow their field. Now, some come right out of the womb this way. They are leery from day one, and that usually is indicative of some sensory stuff going on. They're very wary of the way something's going to feel or look, and they may never give it a chance. So when they do try something, they know what it is, and they're very scared that that new thing they're going to try is going to be unpleasant. And when I say unpleasant, if a child has sensory issues, and I hate to use the word issues, but you know what I'm saying here, sensory differences is a word that I really prefer. It can actually be painful to them, like nails on a chalkboard. If that's something that bothers you, which would send me right through the roof, having a texture that they're not expecting be in their mouth, or a smell up close to their nose, or a taste could be like nails on the chalkboard to them. They're trying to avoid that. That's why they're doing this. That's why they have the food jag. Okay, does that make sense? Are you guys following me here? I hope that at least gives you a little bit of peace of mind, because I'm a really big believer, and I talk about this a lot on the blog and inside of my classes. I'm a really big believer in understanding why something is happening, because I think when we understand why it's happening, then we can help our children, and it allows us to be more sympathetic with. I feel like I need to be more sympathetic a lot of days, because we are tired and exhausted. And if I can just understand a little bit why my child is doing this thing, it just helps me. It helps me personally manage it and gives me the strength to keep trying. So I hope that helps you a little bit. So let's talk about how to break these food jags down. Okay, because now we know they have them. It seems impossible to get them to do anything else. And the thing is, you've probably tried. If sticking with our chicken nugget example, which is probably one of the most common American examples, if you have probably tried to give your child different chicken nuggets, you've probably been at birthday parties and family dinners where there have been chicken nuggets, and much to your chagrin, your child has not eaten them. So you already know that just giving them another food is not necessarily going to work. Now, I'm not saying that there's not value in that, because there is. But what I really think is important is that we start to make very small changes to the food, to their food jag, to the food that they're controlling, to the food that they love. Okay? So that can look very different from child to child. So depending on how sensitive, how extreme your picky eater is, means that change may be this big. Because the key to breaking the food jag down is to make a change to it so that your child notices it but that they don't refuse. Okay, so I'm going to give you a bonus tip here. Some of you may already know this because I talk about it a lot, and it's a crucial principle that I talk about inside Mealtime Works and in my free workshop, and it's having a food that you know your child will eat at every meal. So if your food jag that you're serving is that food that you know they're going to eat, because the last thing we want is for our extreme picky eaters or any picky eater to get to the table and see a plate full of food that they don't like, that they don't recognize. It is a recipe for disaster. So you want to have something there so when they come and they scan their plate or the table, if you're serving family style, which I really love, that they see something there that, okay, I can eat that. Even if it's carrot sticks, even if it's not something that's super filling, but there's something there that is on your child's list of foods that they eat most of the time. Okay. So once you've changed that food jag, you have to have something else there that they like, because it might be a little jarring to them if they see their beloved food jag presented in a different way. So let's talk about what those changes could look like. Okay. And then I'm going to give you all an example. So I would start by thinking, can I change the shape of this food? That's probably one of the easiest ways to change it, but can also be a big change depending. So for instance, if you're giving your child dino nuggets, let's say, again, I know we have lots of people from around the world. So if you don't have dino nuggets where you are, they're just chicken nuggets shaped like dinosaurs, little chicken nuggets. You could cut them in half. That might be a really big change for your child. For another child, it may not be that big of a change, especially if you cut them sometimes when they're cooling. You could just cut a little bit of the tail off and see what they do, okay? Now, you could also change the color of the food. You can change the consistency of the food, the temperature of the food, depending on what it is. So for instance, if one of your child's foods that they like is oatmeal and it has to be prepared a certain way, you could make that oatmeal just a little bit thicker than you normally do, or a little bit cooler than you normally do. Or you can even add a little bit of color to it. You can do this naturally with like just a tinge of a juice, or with a tinge of food coloring. You know, I don't want you squeezing a whole bottle of red dye in there, so now it's bright red. But again, we want them to notice the change and not care. So what's the big deal about this? Okay, because I know that you're probably already thinking, well, so what? Now they're eating a chicken nugget cut in half. But this is really huge in the picky eater's mind, okay? Because something happens here. They are used to seeing this food sometimes day in and day out, sometimes meal in and meal out, exactly the same way, okay? And I see some questions, guys. I'm going to get to them. They're used to seeing that exactly the same way every single time. And now they just took something that's different. Now they are starting to be open to the idea that, hey, this doesn't have to look exactly the same, and it's still okay. And it's still okay. So Jen just asked, and if they refuse? So you beat me to the punch, okay? So this is a possibility. They very well may refuse, which is why we have the food that they normally eat there. They might, because this is a little bit of a trial and error, and it takes a little bit of practice. As a feeding therapist, I can sometimes pinpoint really where to hone in on, but sometimes I miss the mark too. Even with my own children, I don't think I have any active food jags right now in my home, but I certainly have in the past. And knowing how big to make that change takes just a little bit of practice sometimes. You may make too big of a change. If you're nervous, make the change even smaller. So if it's a sandwich and you cut it one way, you could try cutting it just a little bit different than you normally do. Putting the peanut butter on a little bit thinner than you normally do. Just starting to make some small changes. It's okay also to get your child involved in these changes if they're older. So if you're dealing with a 1, a 2, or even a 3-year-old could go either way, they're not going to really understand that you're changing their foods. But you can absolutely say, how about we put what color would you like to put in? Let's put 1 drop of a color in to your macaroni and cheese or your oatmeal or whatever it is and see what color it is. Just 1 tiny drop and see what happens. Now, if they refuse consistently, like let's say you've changed it a couple times and they're just not going for it, then it's probably too big of a change. And I want you to try to back it up a little bit and think, how can I make this even smaller for my child and make it okay? Now, I will tell you that breaking down these food jags, it can take some time. It definitely takes some patience. But when you do start to break them down, it opens the door for them to be able to start accepting new foods, because now they are at least open to the idea, and you can continue to build. For instance, some kids can handle other brands or keeping the same brand but a different flavor. So for instance, if there's crackers, you might be able to try a different flavor of the same shaped cracker or the same type of cracker and a totally different brand. Okay, and if you have completely gone down to the smallest change that you can possibly think of, and I encourage you to just keep thinking smaller and smaller and smaller, because some of our most extreme picky eaters need them to be absolutely minuscule, the changes, and then you keep making the changes over time. So it's not the very next day necessarily, but maybe a couple days later, or the next time you serve it a week later, you've made again another change. It's just another little bit and another little bit until you are having a different brand. Or instead of a chicken nugget, you're having a fish stick, and you can kind of build on these things together. Okay, they can kind of link together to new foods. So this is one really powerful strategy, and I'm really even talking about what I like to call building a bridge. This is a more advanced strategy to new foods. But if your child has food jags, and if they have a lot of them, which some kids do, this is definitely where to start. Okay, now I saw Amanda had a question here while I was going through this. Let's see what she said, and we're going to talk about an example. Amanda said, should the preferred food for us, that would be peanut butter and a honey sandwich, that sounds delicious, be smaller than it would be at a normal meal? Or is it okay if it is normal size, it's enough to fill them up? It is okay if it's normal size. That may mean that they ignore the other food. So you can, I think you can play it either way. The first time you do a change, depending on how much of a picky eater, like if you have a very, very extreme picky eater and you know that even a small change is going to be really difficult for them, I may just go ahead and give them the whole thing. After you've done that a couple times, then I may give half of a sandwich. And again, I think it's really great to have kids in the kitchen helping you also. Okay. Let me see. Jen says, this is awesome. Yay. I'm so glad to hear that, Jen. Sometimes my kiddo will actually complain that she's sick of her preferred foods, but still won't try anything else. I have no idea what to do with that. So this is it, Jen. Seriously. And that to me speaks volumes about what the point that I was just trying to make, because our kids are not doing this necessarily because they love this food so much. It's because they are stuck and they cannot get themselves to try new foods because they are literally scared of them. And again, most of the time, it's not because of some irrational fear. It's because it is like nails on the chalkboard to them if it's a sensory-based issue, or if it's an oral motor issue. So that's like how they chew the food. It's really difficult for them. If they can't move their tongue from side to side, something most of us never think to look at, it's really darn hard to chew. And they can get really scared having something in their mouth that they're not really sure how to move around, or that they're going to gag or choke on. So they have very real reasons, at least rooted somewhere, for wanting that. But I do want to say one other very important thing that I have forgot to mention is that if food jags aren't dealt with, they will eventually burn out on them. So this is probably where your daughter is, because they get so sick of eating the same food and they're so stuck in this rut. I mean, who doesn't get sick of that? You know, I remember when I was in college, I would I would eat those cellophane wrapped crackers with peanut butter inside of them, and I would just grab them out of the house all the time. I ate them like every day, and I remember there was a day like towards the end of college where I just couldn't stand them anymore. And I never ate them again. I was so completely burned out on them. I just never wanted to see one again. And I wasn't a picky eater. This definitely happens to a picky eater and is another really important reason to put the time into breaking those food jags down, even if you're not super concerned about variety. I know you don't want to lose the food. So that's really important. Patrice says, will this video be available to rewatch? It will. It's not going anywhere. So you can use the link and it will bring you right back here if you found it in Messenger, or it'll be under the videos on the Your Kids Table page for sure. And if you know somebody that's struggling with this, by all means, please tag them in it. You know, the weight of the world can feel like you're on your shoulders when you're dealing with a child that is not eating well, and how time consuming it becomes. So definitely hook somebody up if you know that they need help. Let me see here. Okay, so let me walk through an example right after I answer this question from Judith. She said, what would you suggest for tomato soup for a 6-year-old who can't tolerate anything other than pureed texture? Okay, this is a great example. Maybe I'll just use this. If we have more time, I might use my apple example, which was what I was going to use that example. So pureed tomato soup. Okay, so one thing I would start to do for sure is, and I apologize, that is my house phone going off. I forgot to take it off the ringer. So a couple of things actually. One is you can slowly make the consistency thicker. I would probably go thicker than thinner. Don't know if you're making it or using a can, but either way, you can add some heavy cream or some whole milk to it and let it thicken up just a little bit more than it normally is, okay? I would also think about adding some seasonings into it that are not typically in there. Something very mild. This could be a little bit of garlic salt. It could be some extremely fine ground pepper. And again, I would do the smallest amount because our extreme picky eaters can be extremely sensitive to these tastes. If they have a very bland diet, their palates can be way more sensitive than we can even imagine. You could put even just some dried parsley flakes in there, which have like no taste at all, but that they will see. And again, very, very small amounts. That's where I would start for sure. Okay. And I'm sorry, Patrice. I'm laughing at your question just because I have been there. Patrice says, what if your child throws their plate at you? Okay, so if you're anticipating and you know that you have a thrower, again, this is again important because that you have that preferred food there. I would take the plate and I would actually do family style so that they're not throwing a loaded plate at me, that I'm not just handing it down. So they have to scoop the food onto the plate themselves. If they can handle it, I like to have them take some of everything at the table, and I bring pots and stuff right to the table just to keep the cleanup down. But you certainly can handle it however you want. I tell them they need to take some of everything, but they don't have to eat anything. It's up to them what they choose, and they can take as small of an amount as they want. And divided plates come in really handy here as well. Okay, let me see. Elle asked, what do you say to your kid when they ask you why you are changing the food? I love this idea, but I'm sure we're going to get a lot of pushback. Perfect answer, question, Elle. Thank you for asking that. So again, we want to start off with a no pressure environment. So I don't want this to come off as like a dictator kind of thing, like your food's getting changed and it's just the way it is. So I'm really believe that it's sometimes we don't want to overtalk things or say too much, but there's definitely a place to say to our kids and explain to them what's going on. So I would say you could kind of approach this a couple different ways depending on their age. So if they're older, I might say, let's do an experiment and see if your food looks any different if we cut it this way or we put one drop of food coloring in. Okay. If you feel like you can hook them with the science angle, go that route. Some kids are not going to go for that. Otherwise, I would say to them, hey, I thought it would be fun to cut your sandwich this way today. I still have your carrots here that you love or whatever other food it is. And I wanted you, or let me think about this, not I wanted you, but I would say the food is still the same. It's cut a different way. And also keep in mind that the experience is a little different for them. If they're used to eating a sandwich and taking a bite out of it and it's a whole sandwich, that's really different feeling for them in their mouth than just taking a bite of a little sandwich. These are all subtle changes that we don't think about, but that our kids really notice. And you can also get your child involved. So give them a choice and say, we're gonna do some food differently today because it's fun to try new things and to see that it's still the same. Do you want to cut your sandwich in half? Do you want me to cut your sandwich in half or in triangles today? Because then it still gives them an edge of control. And if it in some cases can be better just to have the food on the table already presented in the different way. So again, you can experiment with that. And if you're getting some pushback from your kid, that's okay. Let them push back a little bit and just let them see that, acknowledge that they're uncomfortable a little bit and point out again the food that is there and that it's the same, and don't pressure them at all. Have no expectation for them. And if you're anticipating the pushback, aim for really small changes. Okay, let me see. I think we had another question come up. Let me make sure I didn't miss anything. I got all of the other ones. And Amanda says, I have been trying to serve food family style, but my boy has a very sensitive nose and has asked us to keep the food away from the table. Any ideas for helping his nose acclimate to food smells? Actually, Amanda, I do. I just wrote a post on this about 2 months ago. So I'm going to send you to yourkidstable.com and you will find a very detailed post with lots of ideas. I will say this though, right here. I want you to focus on respecting his boundaries, but also encouraging him to take some of everything, reminding him that he doesn't have to eat it. But again, in the post, there's some detailed strategies in there that I think will be really helpful. And speaking of that, what we have talked about today is also on yourkidstable.com/food-jags. The link is right above us. Or you can just go to yourkidstable.com. I just published that post last week, so it's right at the top of the page. So if you're looking for a review, you want to forward it to a friend, make sure that you grab that. And if you're not already on the newsletter, make sure you sign up while you're there so you can be sure to hear about the Facebook Lives and the other freebies that I have going on often throughout the year. All right, let me see. I think we had one or two more questions. Marla says, what if they are willing to take a bite, but it is so minuscule and quick that they are not even tasting it? Okay, so one of the things that I would think about here, Marla, is, are they taking that bite on their own, or are they taking it under pressure? Like, And if you're not sure the distinction, I would really encourage you to go to yourkidstable.com/free and take my free picky eating workshop, because truthfully, before we even start all of these types of topics, it's really important to have the foundation set. And I talk about those in the workshop that are really the most important things for the most a picky eater or even a mild picky eater to start making progress. And a lot of that has to do with how we're pressuring our kids to eat. And you may not be at all. You may not be. But if you are, and maybe not even realizing it, that can be why the bite comes so small. Okay. I think it's a good step if they try it and don't do anything else. You can also change it up in the middle of the meal and make it kind of a game to say, hey, do you think we could make little triangles out of your sandwich? Again, if they're age appropriate, like I would even give a 3 or a 4-year-old a butter knife with close supervision and help them cut it, because having them see and interact with the food in another way is still a really good thing. And we want to try to build on that the next time that they're eating it. They're going to be more comfortable. Yes. So, and Pauline, I just saw you pop in. Pauline said, will this be available later? I just showed up. Yes, Pauline, it will be. Okay, guys, I think we are just about out of time. And I think I have one more. I'm going to answer one last question and just give a shout out to Tracy, who said hello from Spain. Welcome. It must be getting late there. I'm so glad that you showed up. And Amy said, Amy was commenting to Amanda, and she said that we used to open a crack in the window. Amanda was having trouble with her son, and that's actually one of the suggestions in the post. There's a lot more over there too, Amanda. So thank you so much for tuning in and sharing that. That's so helpful. So thank you all for joining me today. I will be back next month, if not before then. Sometimes I just get compelled and pop in here. And if you haven't already, head to yourkidstable.com and check out the new post on Food Jags. And if you haven't already, sign up for that picky eating workshop. You can find out the core strategies that are really essential even to put in place before you're starting to work on some of this Food Jags. And that's at yourkidstable.com/free. Thank you all so much. It's been a great afternoon with you. Bye.